Welcome to part 2 of the Melt Like a Pro tutorial. In this section, we'll be going over the wig band placement that helps avoid ripples, and then we'll be getting into the install, and that is it. So let's get straight into it. So first things first, you will see this is how a generic wig comes. Now, I don't like these combs and these bands, neither do my clients, to be honest. So I always cut those combs out and I always remove them. So I'm just showing you the top 3 combs are the combs that I'll be removing. I literally never like to keep these in my wigs. They're just so uncomfortable. You really don't need them. Then I sew my band to the actual frontal. Now, I know you're going to be thinking, is the frontal not going to rip, etc.? But no, this actually also helps with a glueless hold, but it also helps to avoid rippling. Now that that's done, let's get into the actual install. So we have the client's bold cap on, and you will see I also to place her head back, and I put the actual wig slightly forward just so she can hold it really, really tightly. And then I pull that band that I sewed in down onto my client's head, and I just make sure the fit and everything is super tight, super snug, and just kind of how she'd like it. Now, as you can see here, the frontal is already looking cute. Like, the complexion is already given, and that's what I refer to in the first part of the tutorial in terms of tinting. You start to kind of just have an eye for it. However, like I said, it is buildable. So if you are starting out using tint, go in with a light amount and then you can build the color and the pigment. So you can see I'm just adjusting the frontal, and I use 2 duck clips just to pull the hair back, and I like to see exactly how the frontal's laying on the head. I usually ask my client, how does it feel? Does that feel okay? In this preference, this is exactly how my client likes her wigs to lay. So that's how I will do it. I usually pull some hair out at the front too, but this is genuinely the synopsis before I go into cutting any lace. Okay, now if you know me, you know I always apply my wigs in sections. I feel like it's the best way for a neat install and the best way to remain in control of what you are actually applying and how it's going to look. So I always cut the wig into 2 or 3 sections, and in this case we are going to use 3. So I always cut down the middle, and I make sure where the frontal is exactly how I'd like it before I cut the rest of the lace off. Now, as you can see, I always cut in a zigzag motion, so that's what I'm showing you in terms of the pattern of how the lace is cut. And then I pull the frontal back. Now, I'm just going to show you how the wig looks once the lace was cut. You can already see the complexion match is insane. But anyway, we go in with the gluing. Now, I just find that building products when you're doing wig installs is always super, super neat. It leaves the install really neat and there's less cleanup. So I go in with my layers. I pull my layers down with the end of my steel comb. I always use the end of my steel comb to do this. And I use about 3 to 4 layers. And the width of the layers is wide enough so that when the glue is applied to the lace, there's enough surface covered so that the install actually has a longevity. So I always make sure that I am spreading the glue as far as I can, but I prefer to work further back than I do coming forward, so there's less cleanup at the front and it's less messy. So I do the same thing in the middle as I do in the sides. I just build the layers, so I will do about 4 layers. Once I'm happy with that, I just pull the lace down and I use my comb to basically press the glue into the lace and make sure that there isn't any gaps and everything is like fully secure. So I always do that, and you will notice that there will be an area in the front that isn't glued, and I don't go in to glue that until the end, because sometimes if you over glue any of the areas in the front, that can also cause rippling, and we don't want that. So I save any unglued areas in the front of the lace till last, so I can cut away at any extra lace to stop any rippling. feel like once you get that first part right, everything just starts to make sense. Now, I always make sure that, like I said earlier, my hair is clipped back, and I make sure that my client is super happy with where the frontal is laying after I apply the first section of the wig at the front. Once she's happy and she's content, then I go in and do the second layer, just in case she decides to change her mind and says, no, I want the wig further back, or I actually want the wig slightly forward. Some people, if they have larger forehead space, they do like to have their wigs glued forward. So I just always have to make sure that once I've glued the first section down, she doesn't want to change her mind. And I just always do this just to ensure that I don't have to remove the wig once it's like fully half glued. So I go in the same thing that I did in the middle. I do that at the sides, and my method still remains the same. I still apply the same layers of glue, and I pull the wig down the same as I did in the beginning. Now, once I go in and I'm about to apply the lace, I always push the side of my client's, forehead back, because it creates a great facelift and loads of my clients like it. And it just gives a really nice fresh face look, especially if you haven't been able to get fresh braids before your appointment. And I personally love it. You don't have to do this with every client. You can just lay the lace down, but we love it over here. So I'm going to teach you guys how to do it too. So before I glue the sides down, I always just slightly lift the skin on the side of the forehead down. I place my lace and then I cut away. Now the install is already here. Like, you see the side, you see it's blended. You see that? That is how your installs should look, super clean before you're even finished. This is the type of effect you want, but you have to master plucking and customization before your installs get to this point. Okay, so before we go into gluing the sides, it's really important that you make sure the sides are incredibly clean. There's no oil, there's no gel, nothing there. It has to be super clean. And I always go in with a layer or two more, because the muscles that you use to speak, obviously at the side of your face, they are very, very close to that area where we glue. So because that side has the most movement, that's why you'll realize that a lot of the time the sides lift first, and it's also closest to your hairline. The natural oils from your hair do cause the sides to lift first. So I just kind of go in with an extra layer or two just to make sure that we are secured. I mean, lifting, sometimes obviously it can happen with movement, sweat, oils, but we just want to avoid that. So again, it's the same method I use in the beginning. And I did say that wig installs in general become very, very repetitive. And once you have your pattern, you should just stick with it. And I do the same that I did in the middle is the same that I apply at the sides, but with just slightly more layers, just to ensure that the wig can kind of stay on slightly longer and my client doesn't have to worry about any lifting or having to top up any adhesive after a few days. So right now, as you can see, the lace is very much melted and we haven't actually even melted the lace yet. This is what I mean by working in sections and starting from the back to the front. I just feel like it allows the install finishing result to be a lot neater. And I find that, doing the finishing touches and, like I always say, building the product is just so much easier. Genuinely, like I find the most difficult part in the install process would be the plucking and tinting. Once you're actually applying the unit, I feel like it is just working slowly, creating a pattern, and just trying to be as neat as possible. That's what I find works really effective for me. So now I'm going to be moving on to the second side, and I do the exact same thing I did on the other side. So I want you to watch very, very carefully without me speaking on top, without me interjecting. And if you're working alongside me to basically replicate everything I'm doing right now, I always like to use my claw clip just to pull the hairs back to make sure I don't accidentally glue any strands into the front of the wig. Again, this all is for a neat finish. And so just watch, just pay attention closely to what I'm doing. Obviously, if this is similar to what you do now, I would say just working in sections and making sure you're as neat as possible. Also gluing further back and then coming down would be key. So just pay attention to everything I do. See if you can take any tips from my technique and apply it to how you currently do hair. And if you're a beginner, try and work alongside me in this clip. You can also replay it as well. Okay, so before, if you remember, I said I don't glue down the remaining bit at the front of the wig. Now, that's to avoid rippling, so I don't end up gluing down any excess lace that I don't need. So before you thought, oh, child, we're done, I could pop that melt band on. No. We go back in, we peel the front up, and we apply our glue in small layers, and as you can see, I push it upwards, and this is just to ensure everything's nice and where it's supposed to be. Now I use, again, the same amount of layers of glue, it's just in a smaller I guess, width. And I just go in very, very neatly with the tip of my steel comb. I feel like everyone needs a steel comb, child. And obviously in this tutorial, you get a full product list. So anything I don't have any feel like was helpful, you should definitely get. Most of the things I get are from Amazon. So I go back in. I basically make sure I go in with my last layer, and then I'll press the lace down, and you'll see how I'll basically ensure that everything is even and in place. And that is what I mean by sectioning and cleanup. So now I'm about to go in with my scissors and basically cut out any excess lace. I do not do this in a straight line either. It's in little C-shape clips, and that's just to cut out any excess lace, and that was just at the side. Now, this is where we'll go in and melt down the first time. So I use my melt band and I'm making sure I stretch it out. I tie it back and I'm covering the lace at the front. I tie it back real tight. I'm not gonna lie, I do cut off the circulation just a little bit, but this just means beauty is pain, and this is how we really press that lace in. No, you do not need to keep that band on for an hour. 15 minutes is okay, or whilst you're styling the hair is fine. As this is the first melt, you will see that I'll end up taking it off again and doing the second melt. But this is just what we do in the first instance. So make sure you stretch that band out. And I use 2 bands, and you'll see why shortly. Okay, so now I'm going in with the second band, and it's slightly thicker. This is because I want the full width of the glue that I applied to be melted, and I want it to fully have stuck down to the cap or skin. So I go in with a thicker band on top just to basically add some tension to the rest of the areas that were glued. We don't just want to melt in the front just for how it looks, but we want to make sure the actual lace is stuck to the adhesive that we applied. So that's why I use the second band. Now, once you've kept that band on for about 15-20 minutes, your client will most probably ask you, girl, you need to take this off. So we take the first band off and we just have to admire the melt. This is when you really know if the look is about to eat. This is when you really know, has my work paid off? Have I melted like a pro? Is my tinting good? Is my lace application good? This is where the reveal happens. So once that lace pops up, you will be able to see where you need to go in and clean up. Now that's usually just excess glue that has now come up with the band. And this is what I meant by clean up. You will now use a Clinénèl skin wipe. This will be in the product list. This is what I use very gently to clean up the excess glue before I go in to melt twice. This skin wipe, to me, is better than using baby wipes. It is alcohol-based, but it's low alcohol-based. So it doesn't wipe off the wig, and you do have to do it very gently because the amount of glue residue should be very little to none. So as you can see, it's been cleaned up, and now you can really see how that lace is melted, child. Okay, so before we go into that second melt, we're going to just make sure the middle part is done. We're going to make sure the wig is laid how we want it to lay before we apply that second melt. Okay, so I am now using an edge brush with some spritz on it to basically comb all those hairs back whilst my client holds down the sides that I'm going to cut some natural, basically sideburns to. I find that going in with spritz on the edge comb just makes it a lot neater. And using a wax stick throughout the install consistently can just make the hair very, very greasy. And I just find that using spritz just basically gives me the effect I want without the greasiness, and is just a little bit more precise. So now that we are ready for the second melt, I'm going to use my Taze Luxe Mega Melting Spray, and I am going to spray it on my finger, and I'm going to apply it to the lace very gently, very nicely, and just making sure I spread it all around. Now, middle parts can be very tedious, especially if you're a perfectionist like me, so it has to be middle. Like, I will part it 50,000 times just to ensure, and I always use a comb that has like a parting comb, and I'll always use a carbon version because I feel like it's not as flimsy, it's a little bit more secure. Now this is where we'll go in with the second melt. And I'm going to use a thicker band this time because, we want to go all throughout. We want to make sure those hairs that we've combed back are very nicely pressed and they're going to stay in uniform. So that's why I use the thicker band on the second melt. The second melt is very essential, by the way, guys. Trust me, you will see the difference anyway. Now, during the second melt, this is where I'm just going to make sure the wig is really flat. I love a really flat, neat install, and I feel like that is something I'll always try and get my work to look very flat, very neat, and very natural. So I go in with my hot comb and I basically just press each side down of the frontal. So I part it in sections. I use my hot comb and spritz, and I just basically make sure the unit is very flat, and then I will flat iron it or curl it depending on what style I'm doing. But making sure you do this in sections, I'm telling you, your wig will be super flat, and your overall just result in terms of style will be very, very neat. Okay, now that that wig is nice and flat and neat, just how I like it, we're about to go in with that second mount, and we're going to see the mount reveal in 3, 2, 1. Look at that. You see how she said, yes, girl. Yes, this is what I mean by melted to perfection. So we're about to go in and clean up the parting. I'm going to use this random concealer palette that I got from Amazon. I'm sure you can get it from the beauty supply store. It is a cream concealer palette, or you can use Ruby Kisses. This is the only time I find it acceptable to use Ruby Kisses or makeup on lace. Okay. So I just go down the middle with my angle brush. Again, all of these things can be found on Amazon and will be included in your product list if you haven't already read that. So now we are about to go in with a dye pen or a root pen, if you will. I just prefer this over the black spray. I feel like the black spray is too harsh and not as natural. So I go in with this black pen, root pen, I guess. And you can see I place the same kind of way you would do the spray. You just use the root pen instead, basically. So I'm just basically tidying that up and making sure it's nice and neat. This is a very tedious process, but I prefer this, honestly, just the overall look to that root spray. I just feel like everyone can tell when you use the root spray, whereas with this, it's just a lot, like I said, natural and neater. That's all I aim for with my installs, honestly. Now, this is what I call a nice, crisp, neat parting. And this is just a close-up of the mount. So you can really see how it's looking. I never use a filter, okay? I just have a LED box light set up in my studio. And that is it, okay? Okay, now let's get back into it. This is just the final finishing touches. This is how we're just gonna make it nice and neat. Now, my client works in a corporate office, so she doesn't do anything super, crazy with the baby hairs or the styling. And I always opt for no baby hairs. I just find them a lot more natural. So we went with just tucked behind the ears, and I pulled obviously those sideburns out because we're just gonna trim them and just basically use the mini irons just to curl them over, and you'll see how I do that. But I'm just trimming them with my mini scissors, and then I'm going to go in with the pencil flat iron just to curl them over, make them a little bit cuter. And then, guys, that is it. Now, you will find that in these wig tutorials, you'll find that sometimes you find your methods may be similar. You'll also find that my work is not going to look the same as yours. Now, I don't want anybody to get super pressed into, I want my work to look like this. Your aim should always be for your work to look better than mine. So consistency, consistency, consistency. Now, not all my methods are going to work for you. So with that being said, I would say try and adapt as much as you can. Now, when I started out, I was on YouTube every day and I was learning from different people, and I had to adapt what I had seen to my own skills. Not everybody's hands are blessed the same. So it's just very important that you take this class and you take this as, let's say, a bonus nugget in terms of knowledge, and apply it to your own skill set. And you will then see how your work or your work improves, or you end up having neater installs than you did prior. So it's just very important to pay that in mind when you are, trying to learn something new. But I hope everyone has been blessed. I hope everyone has been able to learn, and you can see the melt in real life. Now let's go melt like a pro, period.